Welcome everyone to Dropkick DiSKussions presented by Sportskeeda. I'm your host Korey Gunz, along as always with Sportskeeda's wrestling expert Tom Colohue. And Tom, I feel like I say this every week, but I mean, what a week in the world of professional wrestling we've got. We've got quite a bit that we can talk about this week again.
Yeah, I thought just one time, we might get a quiet week. And every single time I feel like I'm saying this exact thing to you because things just go crazy.
Absolutely. And when you talk about things going crazy, I think we've got to start the show off talking about COVID-19 and the WWE, because it came out just recently that there was a developmental talent that had been in the WWE's Performance Center that tested positive for the coronavirus. And WWE, if you look on social media, doesn't look like they're coming out looking too good in this situation. What can you tell us about kind of the timeline of events that have happened from this developmental talent testing positive until the point we are today, where, you know, it's been reported that the TV tapings that were scheduled for Tuesday night have been canceled due to doing testing for a lot of the talent for COVID. So what can you tell us about this entire situation?
Well, I received the email at what I believe was the exact same time as Ryan Satin, who also reported it. And when I put it up, it was clear to me that something was about to go a little bit boom. Now, when we got that message, it was also the time that the talent got the message from the media, which I have serious question marks about. Usually in this sort of situation, the talent will be briefed while a press release is being prepared, and then the press release will go out, or the talent will be briefed and then the talent will talk to the media. That did not happen here. The media were told, and then the talent learned via that way. Things have now changed. The tapings that were supposed to be taking place on Tuesday night have been cancelled. However, they have been moved to Wednesday. So they've not been cancelled for long. Testing has been undergoing the entirety through Tuesday. Mojo Rawley posted a picture of his test procedure. What I will say is that it wasn't a WWE test that the developmental talent in question took. It was an independent test which came back positive, which they then informed the WWE about, because the WWE, when it came to it, Tuesday was the first time they actually tested anyone. They've been doing temperature tests in and out the facility, but they have not actually tested anyone. That said, they are planning to test everyone on Tuesday and then get back to work on Wednesday. So I expect they're hoping for very quick turnaround times to find out what's going on there. They are still going to be doing temperature tests. They expect everyone to be back in work unless you are confirmed positive, in which case they want you to go home. And to be clear, they want you to go home, not anyone you may have come into contact with, because they've still got to put on a wrestling show.
So does the WWE anticipate that they're going to have basically a 24-hour turnaround on getting those results back? Because if they're planning to have TV tapings on Wednesday and they're testing everyone Tuesday, it would seem to me like that would be the only possible explanation for them to still be planning to do TV the next day. So is it an independent company or doctors that are doing these tests that can maybe get them the results faster than the general public?
They have gone to an independent company to get the test done as quickly as possible. They have been assured by this company that they will get a turnaround in time. However, it is actually less than 24 hours because the taping schedule is for both Raw and SmackDown, and it starts well before what had been 24 hours before the testing started. There are people who are still being tested quite late in the day on Tuesday. Only so many had been tested by the time that I actually got the information, which was at about 11 a.m. Eastern time. So it's been a bit crazy. The company in question has assured them that they will get all of the information back and assured them that the tests will be as effective as they can be. However, testing in the US has not been entirely reliable, and I don't believe it has anywhere in the entire world. We also have to be very aware, and I'm going to go into a little bit of technical detail here, which is something that people may want to look into in a bit more detail. But there are cases of people who have had COVID-19 come out of the other end and gotten past it and gotten over it, and then become sick again. There is also, and I don't remember the exact details here, but it is between a 1 in 4 and a 1 in 5 chance that you will actually build an immunity. As in, there is somewhere between a 20-25% chance that you'll actually be immune once you've had it, which means there is a more than 70% chance that you can have it multiple times. They need to be careful here.
Yeah, the WWE's taken a lot of flack since this story came out about not only this situation in particular, but, I mean, there's still a lot of fans that believe that the WWE should never have started running shows even in the Performance Center to begin with. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, if I say anything that's misinformed, but the person in question who tested positive for COVID, they were tested last Tuesday, is what I think I saw in the reports on June 9th, but the WWE was just made aware of the positive diagnosis today, correct?
They were not tested on June 9th. June 9th is the date that they were last at the Performance Center. Well, I don't know when they had their test, but it was during the Raw taping that the WWE were made aware that they had had a positive. I don't know how long the turnaround was in that testing time.
So that's one issue that people are questioning right now is what was the timetable between someone being notified that someone had tested positive for COVID and then when they decided to test people, because obviously they had Backlash this past Sunday where everyone, performed live, and then so that's one issue the WWE is facing. Something else they're taking flack for is there was a report that came out that said that the quote-unquote crowd, the NXT talent and the like that are there as crowd members that we've seen the past couple weeks, were told that they were not allowed to wear masks as members of the crowd because the WWE thought that it kind of killed the aesthetic of having a crowd there live at the show. They didn't want their crowd members all shown wearing masks. It seemed to have been another report that just came out recently that kind of debunks that thought process. What can you tell us about that, about the fact that there were some people saying that the crowd members were not allowed by the WWE to wear masks?
This is in direct reference to the small amount of friends and family of the wrestlers who were invited in to act as a legitimate crowd on Raw this past Monday. Those fans have answered questions on the topic, and the WWE released a statement at the same time, clearly stating that the fans in question chose not to wear masks. This has been corroborated by those fans. These are first-hand sources, so at this point, unless one of those first-hand sources changes their story as it were, it is case closed on that topic. What I will say about all of this is that I have myself suffered with COVID, and it took 9 days for the symptoms to actually come into gear, which means that it's certainly possible that someone may have had it in that crowd and picked it up from someone on June 9th. So there was a risk to those fans as well.
Well, speaking of that specifically, we also saw in Monday's episode of Raw that the Street Profits and Rey Mysterio both went through the crowd during the show. Obviously not following social distancing guidelines. The Street Profits were out doing their thing, dancing with their solo cups. There seems to just be so many things that, as much as we appreciate the WWE putting a product out there for us to view and to entertain us, that it would also seem that the case being made for that the WWE is not taking a lot of these things with COVID as seriously as maybe they should be. There seems to be growing ammunition for that crowd to use to unload on the WWE, and this, Street Profits and Rey Mysterio being in the crowd, seems to be just another example.
Well, first I'm going to have to do a quick peek behind the curtain, and what I will say is that myself and you, Korey, we share notes when we're going through this. We put some notes together so that we're always on topic and we always have little prompts. And I've steered you slightly wrong there, because I've noted that the Street Profits and Rey Mysterio went through the crowd. It was, of course, Dominic Mysterio that went through the crowd. So my apology to you for steering me wrong with that information. On that topic, the backstage area were upset with the Street Profits that they went out and joined the crowd. The plan was not to be out there giving high fives to everyone, and they have obviously taken a risk with that. Dominic's run through the crowd, however, that was planned, and he was definitely breaking social distance with how close he was to some of these people late on. So there was something planned and there was something not planned. But either way, when you are putting people in that situation, or people are taking it upon themselves to be in that situation, anything that they may have picked up in that crowd, they've then taken backstage. So even though everyone had a temperature test, it is not possible to confirm with 100% certainty that no one in that building had COVID-19. That's what the social distancing is for. It's for just in case. Anyone could potentially have had it and had it for several days or even a week without any symptoms, or some people, Idris Elba I believe is quite a famous example of this, simply did not have symptoms despite having it. So it was definitely a strong risk taken by WWE, the Street Profits and Dominic Mysterio. Hopefully nothing was passed on and hopefully everyone is fit and healthy.
All throughout sports in general, the NBA, MLB, football, we're seeing a lot of players and a lot of threats being thrown around for a lot of different reasons, not just for COVID-related reasons, but that is one of them. But a lot of players threatening to sit out their seasons, for a variety of reasons. Could the WWE possibly be another example of that? Could we see a possibility of wrestlers, because of all these things that have gone on, especially in the last 24 hours, saying, hey, we don't feel comfortable and we're refusing to report to work?
It certainly is something that could happen. The WWE would never willingly shut down. If they only had 3 wrestlers, then we'd get Vince McMahon taking on Triple H, We'd get 3 hours of that. They just find storyline ways and backstage segments to make it happen. They've alluded to this in segments from years past, when the only wrestlers they supposedly had were Triple H, John Cena, Sheamus and CM Punk. And CM Punk was on commentary because they needed someone there. They were determined to put on a show. That was storyline, but it's built on real life things. As regards to wrestlers, I can say with certainty a number of people are assessing their current situation. They've seen Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns, even though they may have suffered storyline consequences, they've not suffered personal consequences. Suddenly that option starts to look very appealing. What I can say is that someone did come to me about this, and when I asked them for more information, they essentially said that they wouldn't be losing anything. And I'm going to read a quote here. They're not using me anyway. There are a lot of wrestlers, Raw, SmackDown and NXT, who aren't being used or aren't being used particularly well. Why should they even be there? Don't be surprised to see a few names quietly vanish for a couple of weeks.
To be fair, if Triple H had to go out there by himself and fill 3 hours of time on Raw, he could probably do it. I mean, that's basically what Raw was in about 2005, 2006. It was basically 3 hours of Triple H anyway. So, I think he'd be up to the task.
Even as far back as 2000, I remember a SmackDown where he wrestled 5 matches, all in the build-up to a 6-pack challenge. I think he wrestled Big Show. There was a stipulation there. The Undertaker in a casket match. Kane in an Inferno match. Fought The Rock in a Brahma Bull Rope match, I think it was. And God, who was the last? I think it was Kurt Angle was the last one. And that was essentially your entire SmackDown for 2 hours. So he's done it before.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this past weekend. WWE Backlash was this past Sunday. And we're going to talk about the Edge and Orton match in detail here in a second. So I wanted to ask you first, besides that, what would be your biggest takeaway from the pay-per-view this past Sunday?
Ninjas. Definitely ninjas. So that was a moment. If we go besides Edge and Orton, and everything is built around Edge and Orton, I think the wrestling quality was very high. I was impressed by the chemistry between McIntyre and Lashley. I feel a lot of it, other than that, was paint by numbers. I don't feel we really got that many predictions wrong. I don't feel many people did. I was pleasantly surprised by the women's tag title match. I expected it to be good, but it was extremely good, especially when they added in the fact of all 3 women being in the ring at once. I wasn't sure that's where they were headed with it, because I completely forgot that was a thing. But it is a thing, and it worked out and played out extremely well. But yeah, man, ninjas.
Yeah, I think if you excuse the double countout finish in the women's match, the the only prediction we got wrong was the Edge Orton match itself. So, we had a pretty good percentage there. And neither one of us predicted that there would be ninjas on the show. So I guess you may want to, hopefully don't hold that against us either.
Yeah, to be fair, that's on us. That's very much on us. We should have known. We should have known there'd be ninjas. We should have known that the garbage truck would try and eat them. We should have known the Viking Profits were coming.
Oh my gosh. I would, if I felt like I was on acid with the Firefly Funhouse match at WrestleMania, I'm not sure what I would have to take to relive that Street Profits Viking Raiders segment. Like, I have no idea what the purpose of that was or what in the world was going on. But
so you're saying you want to see a Viking Profit Funhouse match?
Now that would be an idea. It wouldn't surprise me if we see that at the next pay-per-view. I'm not really sure where else they could go from here, so maybe that's the solution. Now, I will say, as far as my takeaway, other than Edge and Orton, which we're going to talk about here in a second, Jeff Hardy, he looked like he took a beating in that match with Sheamus. I mean, I know obviously, all just great selling on his part, but man, some of the shots that it looked like he took from Sheamus, very physical. And I mean, it looked like, and there were a couple of, botches there where he, kind of slipped on the top rope and did some different things and took some falls that maybe didn't look completely clean. And I thought that was a match that stuck out to me just for the physicality of it. And like I said, just the way that Jeff Hardy just sold that beating that he took from Sheamus. I thought I was pretty impressed with that. I said there were some shots in there that I really wondered if he was legitimately, hurt or injured at that point.
There are so many times that I've been told that Jeff Hardy will pull his opponent aside and basically say to them, yeah, just go for it, man. Oh, no, I don't want to do it to it. No, really cinch it in. Really make it look believable. Jeff Hardy, I've mentioned in the past, if he's running down the ramp, he looks blown out immediately, and then he'll wrestle for like 25 minutes, and it doesn't seem possible. I'd love to say to the guy, you should just pause and like take a drink, but I'm worried that they take that in a storyline direction I'm not comfortable with.
Yeah, and I saw an interesting tweet on Twitter after the match that, on commentary they were making such a big deal about, Jeff Hardy being older and that when you get older your body starts to wear down, and that was kind of somewhat of the story of the match. And the tweet made mention that Sheamus and Jeff Hardy, both 42 years old, they're both the same age. But Jeff Hardy was made to look like, the elder statesman in the match. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That suggests to me something that I've believed for a little while, and that's that Jeff Hardy's on his way out, and he's going to go out on his back.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about somebody else going out on their back. Let's talk about that Edge and Orton match. Like I said, we both got this match wrong. We both thought Edge would be coming out on top here, and instead it goes the other way. Randy Orton gets the win with a punt to the head. First question, just obviously it was saddled with this greatest wrestling match ever moniker, but did you feel like it lived up to the hype as best as it could?
No, but it was a very good try. I have to give them immense credit here, especially factoring in that Edge did get injured during the match. If we hadn't spent the last month or so laughing at the branding, and I do very much mean me and you particularly as well as a lot of other people,
sure,
I think it would have been a serious contender. For me, personally, it ranks just behind the Boneyard match and the Men's Royal Rumble for Match of the Year. That's not a bad place to say.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a really good match. I wasn't a big fan of like the piped-in chants and the piped-in crowd noise. To me, that cheapened it a little bit. When
did you hear Vicky Guerrero?
Yeah, and just different things like that. Just and the fight forever chants and things where, I was almost like I was being forced to think that this match was really good, even though it was really good just on its own. But, I feel like it was a little bit cheapened by that. I'm not a huge fan in general of kicking out of a bunch of finishers. I don't think that makes a match great just because people kick out of each other's finishers 3 times or whatever. But I did think they had a very good match, and I think that I agree with you, if it hadn't been hyped as the greatest wrestling match ever and people already hadn't been rolling their eyes at the thought of it 4 weeks out, it probably would be getting an even better reception, than it is now. I agree with you. People probably would be considering it one of, if not the best match of the year at least, but we've talked about it on the show before. I felt like there was no way that they were in a position to be successful given that moniker. Try as hard as they might, because like I said, Edge and Orton did an outstanding job. Edge's facials in the match, that far away look that he gave after the punt, and then Randy Orton whispering in his ear, like all that was great stuff. I just feel like they just weren't put in a position to succeed. I just feel like it was a dumb move by the WWE to give it this tagline of the greatest wrestling match ever.
I completely agree with you there. I've done a lot of research into the reasoning for that. And if you want to check my personal YouTube, it's on there under Google ranking SEO defining WWE storylines, because I go into a lot of detail on it. What I will say about the piped-in audio, they literally had someone in that building telling the crowd what to chant and when to chant it. That doesn't seem legit to me.
No, not organic at all, which I think is a big ingredient for when you have a really good match, is that things happen organically. And so I thought that cheapened it a little bit. I talked about how good Orton was in that match. I think we got to talk about how good is Orton right now. How on fire is this guy as a heel? The way that he's performing and just the character that he's had. For my money, the money feud for SummerSlam should be Orton and Drew McIntyre for the WWE title. I think that if it's anything other than that, the WWE is missing out on a huge opportunity for cashing in on how hot of a heel Randy Orton is right now. What do you think? What's your feelings on, Randy Orton, even at this age and this point in his career, basically being at the top of the totem pole?
I think this is the best Randy Orton has ever been. And I don't just mean that as a wrestler. I also mean as a person, given some of his comments recently. He's coming, for me, dangerously close to overtaking his mentors. Triple H and Ric Flair, when it comes to like a top 10 of wrestling heels. Mm-hmm. And if he keeps going, the sky really is the limit, because I've never been this entertained by Randy Orton. The speed that he was moving in that match, even thinking back more than a year to his feud with AJ Styles at WrestleMania, the promos he was cutting, this really is Randy Orton at his absolute peak. And I'm loving it. McIntyre has suggested in interviews that he wants to be taking on Randy Orton for SummerSlam. That's certainly possible, although Brock Lesnar is, of course, an option.
Yeah, that was going to be my question to you, is just, as a fan, who would you rather see Drew McIntyre fight at SummerSlam? Would you rather see McIntyre Lesnar, or would you rather see McIntyre Orton?
I'd rather see McIntyre Orton and Lesnar Lashley.
There you go. Now, since we're talking about the Raw side of things, we saw this past Monday's edition, but even before the show got to air, there was a lot going on backstage as far as who would be in charge of Raw going forward, and we found out that Paul Heyman is essentially out as the creative head of Raw, and Bruce Prichard is in. Prichard basically now takes over both Raw and SmackDown as the lead writer or the head of the creative team for both shows. What can you tell us just about this move being made? Was it a Vince call? Was it, something that Heyman was doing that the higher-ups didn't like? What can you tell us just about this decision to take Heyman out and put Bruce Prichard in and basically make him in charge of both shows?
I went into a lot of detail about this on my YouTube on Friday, if you want to check it out over there. But for a quick just assessment of what happened, Vince McMahon has been unhappy with Paul Heyman for a while. There are a few different things at play. For example, they weren't particularly happy about Heyman's use of AJ Styles. They didn't have particular faith in some of the people that Heyman was choosing to push. There were question marks about names such as Liv Morgan and Apollo Crews. And of course, last week, a Liv Morgan vignette was pulled at the last minute. This week, Liv Morgan wrestled in a match that lasted about 2 minutes. And, so it was strange in that regard. Heyman and Vince McMahon haven't seen eye to eye for a while, particularly since there was no longer an XFL to occupy Vince. So Vince has been very present at Raw, and that has created the issue. The in-house Raw has not really done anyone that many favors, and I'm worried about certain talents that have been pushed in a certain direction via Paul Heyman and the interesting way he does things. Let's look at the Viking Raiders and the Street Profits again. This week it felt more like a Prichard show. There were a lot of storylines, yes, still ongoing, But the arrival of Shelton Benjamin, the surprise appearances of legends, and more matches, most of which were much shorter, is more Bruce Prichard's way of doing things than Paul Heyman's. That said, I do feel like they were working from an already written script and making minor changes. The constant use of like small backstage segments relating to the main event segments, so McIntyre, Lashley, Orton, Christian, that has already proven to be very good for their ratings, and that really is the crux of the matter for Vince McMahon.
Yeah, we'd heard that about Heyman, that, one of his, goals for the show was to kind of push some new talent and push some young stars. And then, and now he's out, and we hear that Vince wants more legends on the show. He wants more kind of established stars on the show. And then so, the very first Raw after Backlash, we see both Christian and Ric Flair on the show. Christian, pretty big deal considering he hasn't been in the ring for a while, and we assume that his in-ring career was pretty much over. And then, of course, you've got Ric Flair, who's made some appearances on the show, but not really in a in-ring role or not really even involved in a storyline. And, of course, he kind of interjects himself into the Randy Orton deal. What can you tell us about, both these guys being on Raw this past Monday, and does it lend some credence to the idea that with Heyman out and Prichard in, Vince is having a little bit more of a hands-on role with the show, and one of his credences is that, hey, we need more established legend-type guys on the show to try to draw in ratings?
There were definitely more legends in this one, and I've got to give them credit because they decided to come to a show with a legend killer on it, so I dare say we know where Randy Orton's going next. Yeah, we had some big names. We had Christian, who is definitely, and I want to be clear here, Christian is not cleared to return to wrestling. Cannot stress that enough. We had Ric Flair, and of course, The Big Show. That came out of nowhere.
And as a face. Like, wasn't he just a heel, like, the day after WrestleMania? And
the day after WrestleMania, yes. But to be fair, also while he walked down the ramp, he turned heel, turned face, and then turned heel again. So when he got into the ring and turned face, it all balanced out. Who knows what The Big Show is anymore, let's be honest. There's a few people in wrestling who have transcended the face-heel dynamic, usually because they're almost universally hated and respected. Roman Reigns, Charlotte Flair. Curiously, he doesn't quite fit the bill, but still transcended face and heel. Finn Balor has very much reached that level. The Big Show has not reached that level, and we really struggle to know where he is, but whenever he comes out, there would usually be a big pop because, hey, I remember him. So, face. It worked at WrestleMania because you can be a heel because there ain't no one there to cheer for you. We are seeing so many more legends, and that is definitely a way that they are trying to bring viewers in. That is Vince's preference for doing things. Also, one of Vince's go-tos is leaking information. The Christian information was leaked early in the day, and almost everybody had it. In the hours preceding Raw, almost every wrestling journalist was talking about Christian, and they weren't being subtle about it at all. I'm confident that information was meant to get out to get the rating going, and by the look of it, it did pay off.
Here's my thing, though. We've talked on the show even about that. The message from WWE has always been, the ratings aren't that big of a deal. We know ratings are going to be low in the summer. The TV execs are happy. Like, we're not worried about ratings. So if that's the case, why not use this time to try to create some more stars, push some new names, get some new blood out there? And instead, they bring in Christian and Ric Flair and some of these guys back in the name of trying to get ratings, but the WWE always tells us that they're not worried about the ratings.
I would love to be able to answer that question because the fact is USA and Fox were putting no pressure on the WWE whatsoever to pick up ratings. This time of year is historically low ratings every single year. We've talked about this at length. Vince McMahon got cold feet at some point and changed his mind. That's the only possible reason. The USA Network want what the USA Network want. I've reported on that as well. They want the 24/7 championship to have more prominence, and they want access to big name stars. Admittedly, bringing back some legends fits the bill of access to big name stars, but you also still have Randy Orton, you have Seth Rollins, you have big stars. you can focus on some who need a bit more of a push. Kevin Owens has been working with Angel Garza recently, and it's been great for both men. Just let people get over. You can't do this where you're constantly giving them push-pull. If The Rock hadn't won the WWE Championship at Survivor Series 1998 in the Deadly Game, he would never have become The Rock we know now. He was pushed consistently for years. Stick to your guns, get people new and fresh coming in, and give them a shot. I do wonder if the WWE would have actually won the Monday Night Wars if not for the fact that most of their big names had been stolen away and they needed to make some new stars. Would they have given people like The Rock, like Triple H, a chance?
Now, one guy that maybe wasn't happy with the push he was getting is AJ Styles. Now, while he was on Raw at least, and we talked about him moving over to SmackDown, and that had been in the works for a while now. We've mentioned multiple times that even as far back as January, you had reported that the plan was to move Styles over to SmackDown. But there was a report that came out this past week that maybe one of the reasons that he was moved over was because he wasn't happy with the storylines that Paul Heyman was coming up for him, and also that maybe there was a feeling in the locker room that AJ Styles wasn't necessarily very much liked by the other superstars on the Raw brand because of some of the political and social views that he has and that he has commented on in other avenues on podcasts and interviews and things of the like. What can you tell us? Was there something more to AJ Styles being moved to SmackDown other than just that had been the plan all along? You know, was there some other factors at play like his social and political views or maybe some friction between him and Paul Heyman?
I will say that it's slightly too far to say that AJ Styles wasn't liked. A lot of people really like and respect AJ Styles. However, a lot of people also look at AJ Styles to take up certain leadership roles, which he has not been doing. He has been certainly doing his own thing. There are people, most notably people like Randy Orton and Daniel Bryan, who give AJ Styles a lot of shtick. Just a lot of stick for some of his views. And personally, I'm not going to comment on the views, but I do feel that if there is any bullying, that is a problem. If AJ Styles didn't feel comfortable where he was, and you do have to factor in the absence of the good brothers, as it were, he is certainly entitled to move. And yes, back in January, this is something that was being discussed. I can't say how AJ personally felt about his storylines, but I know WWE management weren't happy with what he was given. Vince McMahon has become a huge fan of AJ Styles over the years, and leading into WrestleMania, The Undertaker didn't confirm his appearance until after the Rumble, so even in January, Styles had nothing going into WrestleMania. Moving to SmackDown was on the agenda a long time before it actually happened, and from what I can tell, he feels a lot more at home there.
Yeah, I can't imagine that, the creative team would move AJ Styles over to SmackDown and immediately give him the Intercontinental Championship if they didn't like the guy.
Essentially, yeah, and it's not just the creative team, it's also long-term friendships that he's made with Daniel Bryan and Xavier Woods. He likes being around gamers as well, and there aren't so many of them on Raw. That seems a silly thing, but you've got to have personalities that get on. You've got to enjoy coming to work, and I feel SmackDown's just a much better fit for him.
Last thing, we're going to talk about just a couple of quick hits here, a couple of other news stories that we just want to get your comments on. First, the WWE legal team came out with a response today debunking some of the Saudi Arabia stories that came out. If you remember back at the last Super Show, there were some stories that came out about superstars being deserted without a plane and without a way home in Saudi Arabia, and that they were stuck in the country, and that Vince McMahon had flown off in his private jet and had stranded the rest of the roster there, and et cetera, et cetera. But the WWE legal department came out with a statement that, in their opinion, debunked a lot of that reporting. What can you tell us about kind of this latest development in this Saudi Arabia story from this past fall, I guess it was?
Keeping it as careful as possible, because we as journalists do need to be very aware that commentary can affect the outcome of any potential trial. The WWE have been making calls and eliminating suspects when it comes to who the confidential witnesses are, and apparently they're very confident that they know the names. I do not know them, I will not be trying to learn them, and if I accidentally come across them, I will not share them. There is a reason these are confidential. The testimonies they've given is powerful, but based on what I've heard, WWE are confident they'll be able to come out of this one easily enough. There is a lot that happens in the legal system that can prevent an outcome favourable to one side or the other. That is what I've been told on this one.
Charlotte Flair was on Raw Talk after Raw this past Monday and had some interesting, shall we say, comments about her career and the rest of the Raw roster. The word entitled came up a couple times in that interview. Was this just another example of maybe a worked shoot style interview between Charlotte, or was this getting some of her true feelings off of her chest?
It was both. They're at the minute trying to drive viewership to Raw Talk because it's just started and they're worried no one's going to watch it. So people like Charlotte Flair is ideal for that. And they want a big moment. If you think back to Talking Smack, they basically invented the work shoot, especially when you think of like The Miz and Daniel Bryan or Rhino with Santa making Renee Young very uncomfortable. That moment when The Miz went in on Daniel Bryan, it made Talking Smack must-see television. I still miss it now. That's what they're trying to get. So Raw Talk is supposedly in that spirit. And to be fair, Charlotte does have a lot to get off her chest recently. There is a lot of abuse going on of Charlotte Flair on social media. And even though people are entitled to their opinions of a character, can we remember that there is a person here? You are talking at a person with thoughts, feelings, who is doing their job. So, if she wants to talk, she is welcome to do so. We are welcome to our opinions of her character.
Reports are making the rounds on social media that, quote, a major star has been campaigning backstage to work with the NXT talent. We've seen, like Charlotte Flair, Finn Balor, some of these big names kind of making the transition over to NXT, at least for a little while. Any guesses at who this major star might be that is looking to maybe slide that down to NXT and do some work there?
There are actually a lot of names that are interested in doing that. I reported there was a short list of WWE stars who wanted to work in NXT back in, I think, December. And then shortly afterwards, Kevin Owens appeared on a takeover, and suddenly that's when my report started getting picked up by other sites. So people seem to think I was saying after the fact, oh, Kevin Owens is staying in NXT, when in reality, before the fact, I'd said that WWE stars would be appearing in NXT. So that was a wonderful one where people were saying, oh, you're just guessing, when in reality, Kevin Owens had confirmed my report from months before. Good times, that one. Since then, I've learned quite a lot more names, Asuka being one of them, Cesaro. Naomi has confirmed that she tried to go back to NXT. Members of the New Day have mentioned that they would love to work in NXT. Ricochet, the same. Kevin Owens obviously is one of them, Charlotte Flair, and Sasha Banks and Bayley, who I mentioned a couple of months ago, I believe, as people who really wanted to spend more time at NXT, and that is why the Tag Team Championships for the women have been set up as they are. So, could be any one of those, could be Seth Rollins, could be Kevin Owens, could be Sasha Banks. Really, almost anyone that a report comes out as and says these people want to work in NXT, it's almost guaranteed to be right because so many people want to do it.
And I think this COVID area, because all of the shows are filmed in the PC, that NXT even more now than ever really feels like on the same playing field as Raw and SmackDown. It doesn't feel like it's a demotion to go and work NXT for a couple of months.
Completely agree, and I feel a lot of eyes are on NXT. People are trying to pull together and make more people watch it, so why not let them?
The last thing I want to ask you about, the latest edition of the Undertaker documentary, The Last Ride, came out this past Sunday after Backlash, and I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody if you haven't watched it, but make sure that you do go check it out. But it would appear that the final chapter, Chapter 5, is going to be based around the build-up to his match at WrestleMania with AJ Styles and kind of what led into that match coming together. And I've seen on social media some very interesting theories that people are having, and I want to ask you about it. Could we see The Undertaker make a surprise announcement of his retirement on this final chapter of The Last Ride?
We very much could. We could also see The Undertaker announce his retirement and then compete at next year's WrestleMania. It's The Undertaker. This is what he does.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the conclusion of that documentary. It's been a great documentary, and like I said, I think Chapter 4 actually has been one of the most interesting episodes. You see a lot of backstage things and kind of see The Undertaker in a light that a lot of people never had before. So make sure that you go and check that out, and then we'll all be tuned into Chapter 5 to see if something unexpected were to happen. To me, it would seem very appropriate for The Undertaker. You know, we've always wondered about, you know, when his last match would be, how he would retire, you know, what kind of would he keep in character, would he break character, what would happen? And we as fans, I think, want to see the big grand send-off for a guy like him, but it would seem so appropriate for him to just at the end of that documentary be like, yeah, that was my last match, and that be the end of it, and we just never see The Undertaker, you know, ever again. I mean, it would seem like that would be just so in his personality to not make a big deal of it when we as fans are just waiting to give him that grand send-off that he deserves.
It would be a really big moment, but I would not trust it for a second.
Well, we shall see, and we thank you guys for tuning in once again this week on Dropkick DiSKussions. We always appreciate our listeners and our viewers on YouTube. Please continue to like and comment on our videos, and make sure that you subscribe to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel. Make sure you also subscribe to Tom's personal YouTube channel as well. He gives even more wrestling news and notes and reports over on his channel, things that we don't talk about here on the show. You can find over at his personal YouTube account. So make sure you give him a view and give him a subscription. You can also follow Tom on Twitter at Colohue. If you'd like to follow me, I'm at Korey Gunz. And also make sure that you check out Sportskeeda.com for all of their latest wrestling news and articles. We thank you for joining us again, and we will see you next week on Dropkick DiSKussions.